Good.
Welcome back to the Warriors Way podcast. Um, this is an exciting one. We're back in season two and having some guests on the show. So I'm excited to introduce you all to a friend of mine. His name is also Tim. And Tim has been a really big spiritual mentor of mine over the last 4 years or so. And in this podcast, we're going to unpack kind of how our relationship formed and what the organization is that he is responsible for. And the big thing we want to take out of this podcast is how the spiritual growth and the spiritual exercise is just as, if not more important than the physical exercise and the physical work. So I'm going to give it over to Tim. Tim, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and kind of give some of your background.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Tim Shelton. I'm the co-founder and executive director of SeekWell Ministries out of Michigan. And I found my way to SeekWell accidentally. I've been in finance for a long time and a long time ago helped a friend plant a church. And then when that finished, I thought that was a really nice stint in ministry. I think I'm good. I'm going to live in the corporate world now. And found myself in a rough spot in 2010, 11, 12, and um, learned how to get away and be quiet and listen to the voice of God. And after 4, 5, 6 years of doing that with first with just with a friend and then eventually a bunch of friends, um, I felt like God was calling us to start Sequel. And so here we are. Think it's 8 years later, and we've had a couple thousand people come through experiences over the years. And happy to say I'm leaving the finance job in June, and we'll be doing this full time for the long haul. So that's where I find myself today.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations for your soon-to-be exit.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know that's been a goal for you for a while, so I'm
it
excited
has.
for
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
So SeekWell is a um, it's a men's and women's ministry, right?
yep,
Um, so there's a lot of information on that. I can put their website in our show notes. So if you guys are interested about learning more about specifically SeekWell, you can go and dive in there. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we go through at SeekWell. So Tim, you were a big part of me starting Warriors Way. I can remember us sitting in on the mountain in Estes Park, and
yep,
we were talking about what is God laying on your heart to do that you're not listening to right now. And I jotted down and then I shared there's a group that I've been wanting to start for guys in our area to grow in connection in their faith, family, and fitness. And I feel like God's telling me to start that. I've been wanting to do it for a while, and I thought that was going to be good enough. And everybody jumped on, okay, well, when are you starting it? I was like, oh, I'll start
yeah,
it this fall. I'll start it this fall. And they're like, no, let's put a date. What is the date you're going to start it? Because a date makes it real. And
hmm
so I put the date on there, and there was a lot of fear that came with making that proclamation because now I just told a bunch of people that I look up to, number one, and number two, that are going to really hold, I know they're going to hold me accountable to this. They're going to be checking on me when that date comes and asking how we're doing. So it kind of put a little bit of, good, healthy pressure on me to get that ball rolling when we started it. But Warriors Way that's exactly what it is. It's all about helping men build community and grow to be the best versions of themselves in their faith, in their family, and in their fitness, and how those all three kind of make this, three roped binded web that is, the Bible talks a lot about when a rope of three cords is hard to break,
right.
and those are our three cords. Does Sequel have some pillars that it kind of stands on, like ours is faith, family, fitness? Does Sequel have something like that? Number one, and maybe to back up a little bit, did you face any, I guess, uncertainty or some pressure or fear when you were getting ready to start SeekWell, and officially market it out to other men
Yeah,
and women?
yeah. I mean, we just kind of figured it out as we went along. So I think ignorance is bliss sometimes. I mean, we it got real. I mean, we originally it was a couple of us, and then it turned into 14, 15 guys getting away. My wife was also she had a very similar women's thing happening. And so we just thought, well, there's 15 guys that like it. Why wouldn't everybody like it? We had literally no idea what we were doing. But probably the smartest thing we did was when you talk about pillars, we got some of the original members of SeekWell together, and we said, what is it that makes this thing special? Because to be honest, what we would tell our wives is we're getting away in the woods. We'll come home without a shower. We're going to eat some average food, and we're going to, be quiet and reflect on our lives and listen to God. And we were able to boil it down to a couple of words. Like if we want to seek God well for the rest of our lives, the key is to slow down and be still. So be still is the first phrase, and then listen to God. So the approach that we take is if Jesus was the smartest human that ever lived, and God knows everything about us and always will, we should probably have a practice of asking him what he has to say about our lives. And so, SeekWell has morphed into this much deeper, more rich experience, which you've been through, which we call our 1 year journey. And that is intentionally discipling guys or walking with them through a year. And it's about to get even more rich in the year or two to come. But ultimately, it does start with learning to be still and listen for God's voice. And one of the reasons why we came around those pillars is because most people who would call themselves a Christian, I don't call myself a Christian, just to be clear, I call myself a follower of Jesus, because in today's world, that is very different things. But I think what I mean. We're in the Christian realm. I get that. They end up knowing a lot about God, head knowledge, but often they don't know, or we don't know much. We don't know God, actually know Him, know His voice, know the intimacy that comes with that, closeness. There's a very big difference. Going to church, listening to somebody preach, doing your time versus spending time on a regular basis with God so that He can shape you and form you. That's why I'm such a big fan of Warriors Ways, because that faith, fitness, family, those are three of the five F's. As we go through we have the five F's: faith, family, finances, fitness, and fun. And so fun's in there for you guys, whether it's priority or not, I don't know, but fun's in there. So you're nailing uh, four of the five. But that's just a lens to look at our entire life. And what would happen if we ask God about our faith, or if we ask them God about our fitness or our family? He'll lead us and shape us and mold us, and ultimately we will have the life we desire if we can learn to seek God well. So that's kind of what SeekWell is formed on, and fitness is a big part of it.
Yes, it very much is. For anybody who's gone and attended, you definitely get some exercise in while you're there. That's
Hmm.
always a big part. So when you were starting it, did you face any kind of fears or anything when you were getting it going, or was it kind of just all natural, like, hey, we're going after this? And you mentioned like ignorance is kind of bliss when you're going in. So
Yeah,
for me, it was when I started Warriors Way, there was a lot of, oh, I want, I think a lot of guys could benefit from this. So I have this expectation of I want, this many people there. And,
yeah, yeah,
when there were weeks where we showed up and there was just two or three of us, and it did get discouraging, but then I had to remind myself, why am I doing this? I'm doing this as much for me as I'm doing it for the guys here. So if I
hmm
show up and it's just me and one other person, it's worth it for me. And I kind of had to
hmm
reshape my mindset on that. But did you go through anything similar when you started SeekWell?
yeah. I mean, when we first started it, it's new and it's fresh, and there was this high that came with that. But then, in the middle, I think say like years 4, 5, 6, um, when the newness wear off, yeah, there was a season. It was really challenging to get guys to sign up for a 1 year journey. Life is busy. There's a lot of reasons. And so, yeah, there was some discouragement that set in there. And I think the reality is, it's always going to be hard because, there's a lot, you guys, if I'm not mistaken, work out, on Saturday mornings, right? So there's all kinds of reasons not to show up on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Or there's all kinds of reasons not to say, you know what, 4 retreats and I'm going to get a mentor for the year and I got to come to these virtual things. Yeah, that's a lot of work. I'm good where I'm at. So what we find for us is that people come to us when there's a pain point in their life. And I think it's the same way with fitness, honestly, when they're just like sick of being sick and tired. But it's like, you know what, I'm 50 pounds overweight, or you know what, I'm like, I feel like crap all the time. I'm tired all the time. Generally speaking, this isn't like an always statement, but it's generally true. People don't change until there's enough pain in their life. And I actually think like that's part of the journey as a Christian. Like we sign up for suffering, whether we know it or not. And that's actually where Christ shapes us the most is in our pain, but we don't willingly sign up for it. It usually comes when we're at the end of our rope that God does the most amount of good in our lives and our character formation and so forth. So that's where people generally find SeekWell. We call it kind of like the wall. Like I've hit a wall, and unfortunately, the only way to go and get past the wall is to go through it. And so you got to take an inward journey, and it has to start with learning to get to know God. But fitness is kind of the same way. Like when you hit that wall physically, you're like, well, you got a choice. I can go back to the couch and eat the Doritos, or I can get up and do the hard thing. But the thing that's crazy about both parallels is it only takes about 30 days to realize what you've been missing out on, like health, love, strength, joy. It doesn't take 3 years. It's like it's a very short period of time, and then your eyes are open. You're like, yeah, I want more of this.
Yeah, I've seen that in multiple different areas in myself, but most recently in some other people. And
Hmm.
guys that the pain of not doing it has got to be greater than the pain of doing it. Like both
Yeah,
are going to be hard, both are going to be painful. You got to choose your hard. And
you do.
waking up at Saturday morning, coming out in the cold is hard. It's difficult. We're not doing it because it's easy. There's a lot of different things. We could just meet for
Yeah,
coffee if we wanted to.
totally.
But
Yeah.
we do it that way because we're looking for people who genuinely want to change the way they're living in those three areas. And most of the people that are coming to that have hit that wall in one or all three of those areas. And like you said, the time that it takes to notice the change is very short in
Yeah.
comparison. And guys that are working out, they come in, they haven't worked out hardly ever. And now they're going to
Hmm.
the gym 3, 4 days a week and they're
Hmm.
praying and they're reading their Bible a couple of days a week. And it's something that they haven't done consistently.
Yeah.
And 3, 4 weeks later, they're like, I have no idea what happened, but my life is different.
Yeah.
And it's
That's great.
like, yeah, I mean, the steps, it's difficult to make that choice, but once you make that choice, it's just about making the next right choice. It's not like some huge thing that you got to do. Um,
Yeah.
SeekWell, it is a big commitment. I know that, when I signed up and I went through that interview process, I'm the kind of person that loves to say yes to things. Like, you know me, I'm a yes guy. So instantly I'm like, yes, I want to do this. But then there's all these other things that come flooding through my mind. Like it's going to be,
Hmm.
if I say yes to doing this and I really go all in on doing it, there's going to be some uncomfortable times for sure.
Yeah.
I just had my daughter, right as I started that. So
Hmm.
I'm getting ready to sign up to go away for 4 weekends this year. And
Yeah.
you mentioned it. I'm telling my wife, yeah, I'm going to go to this place in Jackson, just outside Jackson. I'm going to put my phone in a box for the weekend. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to play a lot of games. I'm going to eat some good food. I'm going to have a fryer with some friends, and I'll be back in 3 days. Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot that goes into that, and it's the same type of mindset with Warriors Way. Like, yeah, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna go work out with some buddies. And it's like when there's two different perceptions, and the people that we leave to go do those things, they're going to see it. Number one is the perception when we leave, but then the perception when we come back. And
Yeah.
that's what I see has been impactful in both of these scenarios. But um, for you, I know, you kind of mentioned like we're telling our wives we're going to spend time in the woods. We're not going to bathe for the weekend. For those of you interested in SeekWell, they do bathe now.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
we have quite the home to now do our retreats from.
It
So
is it is
that
no longer that ru the rustic atmosphere. Some people really dig that. When I was there,
yeah,
I remember I think it was Rob, our
yeah,
first weekend there. They have a beautiful house. This is a beautifully renovated house that is highly equipped to handle 15 guys for the weekend. And Rob brought his tent to sleep
yeah,
outside. Some guys, that is, and I'm kind of along that line. Like some guys, that is their form of silence and solitude. They don't want to be in the house. They want to get
yeah,
outside the house, but there are definitely accommodations to shower. But
right,
you know, they're going to pay attention to how we act when we come home. So like you guys started this, you mentioned that like this is a thing that you're telling your wives you want to do.
hmm
Did you get any pushback from, the spouses when you're talking about this is what we're gonna
yeah,
commit to doing? And, what are some things that you had to do to make sure that when you came home, like you're showing up the way you need to be so that these
yeah,
things are like the value is noticed?
yeah. It's interesting when you as soon as you start talking about like the other perspective, I thought about my friend. I won't use his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but he was a part of the original group, and uh, it turned out his wife hated SeekWell for a very long time. And I couldn't figure out like why. And it came out a number of years later. She's like, "Yeah, when so and so comes home, what I hear is I had this glass of bourbon, and we had this big of a fire, and we had this much fun, but he never disclosed what God was doing in his life in their relatively young marriage." And so she would hear about how much fun, but she's home with the kids, right? And she's just frustrated because she's like, "Well, wait a second, like, what does God do in your heart?" Well, He was doing something great. What it took was a couple of years of seeing the fruit, noticing the fruit instead of just being angry about, whatever she did or didn't know. And then it clicked, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, the practice, not SeekWell, like his time with Jesus, is why I'm seeing fruit in his fitness and in his this and this, and his faith and so forth." And she's like, "I got to be part of the next group." And I think she came through like group 7 or 8, if I'm not mistaken. So it was literally like 7 years later. And it really, we teach guys this now is, it's okay to go home and keep some things to yourself and digest it and process it. But ultimately, you got to let it out in two ways. One, you got to talk to your spouse about it and talk about why this is important and what God's doing or what you're learning. But the other is you got to live it out. Most importantly, you got to
Mhm.
live it out, right? So, you know, uh, it's a really big deal. And and this is part of like the ignorance is bliss. We didn't know what we were doing. Now that we know, we coach guys on this because what it what we see most often is when one spouse goes through the 1 year journey, it's just a year or two later the other spouse is signing up because the transformation is so great that the other spouse is like, I whatever that is, I want that. And you're an example of this, right? Like
Mhm.
Sarah came through a couple of groups later, and that's a very normal thing that we see. And the most beautiful thing for us is like now it's not just about Tim's life changing or Sarah, but it's about the Martin family changing. And so
Mhm.
your kids now that'll ripple down to your kids and your grandkids one day. And that's the joy we get what we get to do.
Yeah, I know that I was in that boat of, you come home and yeah, I played disc golf for the first time, or I went fishing, I caught this big old bass, and I did this, and it's all these things that they genuinely are exciting. And for me, a lot of the stuff we work through at SeekWell, I do internalize. And
Hmm.
I don't like to come home and talk about it like and that those are things I'm working through still to this day. But it's not like hey babe, I need you to sit down. I want to tell you this is what I unpacked this weekend. This is where I'm at,
Yeah.
spiritually and emotionally. So it's like I would be chewing on that stuff, but I wouldn't even really know how to talk about it yet. And I would come home really excited and ex the exact situation you're talking about. Like I had a 1 year old at
Yeah.
home. Like it was tough. And I had to learn quickly, like there are some things I can keep to myself, but where she's going to see the impact is how I respond to all these other situations for the next 4 months until I go back.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
that's the change that they start seeing, like you mentioned. And it's like, okay, wait, what is going on? Like, it's not just the guys going and having fun. And it's really helped me with Warriors Way. I mean, we're doing it every week. So it doesn't mean
Hmm.
I necessarily have to be there every week. I have somebody, if I'm not there, they can cover for me. But if I'm in town, I try to be there. But I
Yep.
understand that is a huge sacrifice for my wife. Now we
Hmm.
have two kids. We have a dog, and the house is full, and it's busy at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm leaving
Yeah.
at 6:30. So 30 minutes after I leave, the house is, Grand Central. And
Yeah.
it's an investment. So if I'm coming home and I'm just sharing pictures of, yeah, look, we were pulling sleds today and throwing snowballs at each other, and we went to coffee and we sat there at coffee for too long or whatever, and that's all she's seeing. It's going to be like,
Hmm.
hold on a second. Like I'm
Yeah.
sitting here getting trampled on by kids and you're out having coffee with the guys.
Yeah.
And it's about letting what's going on show through you. Like, and I tell the
Yeah.
guys every Saturday morning when you leave, like, okay, go home and don't let this be the highlight of your day. Let
Yep.
this be the thing that the catalyst for the highlight of your day, which is going home and being present and being the person you're supposed to be for the people you're supposed to be there for.
Yeah. I think there's some really practical things. Like I've learned, like my wife doesn't need to hear play by play of the whole weekend. As we just can't. We had a experience last weekend with our ninth group. She doesn't need a play by play of that. The highlights, right? Like two or three
Yeah.
things go a long way, and then always like, well, what's one thing God's doing in me? What did I learn from this? And I think sometimes the reason we don't share is we don't want to be held accountable. And uh, I think there's two things guys don't generally like, and it's accountability and discipline.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, not all guys, right? But we don't like discipline, which is feeds into Warriors Way. Like that's why they just it's such a beautiful thing. But we don't like to be held accountable either. Like when we say something out loud, we speak it into the universe or to our spouse or to our friend. Like a good friend, a good spouse is going to say, "Hey, I thought you said this is the direction you want to go." But the thing about that is if you want to become who God's created you to be, it's going to take work, and you're going to have to be accountable. You can't do whatever you want because Jesus says you got to pick up your cross, follow me daily. If you want to gain your life, you got to lose it. So
Yeah.
you choose. But I want life to the full, and I want the life Jesus has for me. So that means I'm going to have to beat my body, like Paul says. I'm going to have to train myself, and that also means I'm accountable to that. We don't often talk about a pursuit of holiness, right? Of being like Jesus, of allowing God to strip the things away in our life that shouldn't be there, that don't belong. That's accountability.
Mhm.
And if we can have a little bit more of that of men, we'll get what we're looking for. We will, but you got to embrace those two, core attributes.
Yeah. One thing you said as you were talking that kind of sparked a thought is I think another thing that kept me from really unpacking where I was in that journey was, I would, I- Sarah's been in church her whole life. She grew up
Hmm.
Catholic, and I grew up very strict Baptist. And I was in the nursery, I think the afternoon I was born. I was born on a Sunday, so I was at Sunday night service. And, um, Sarah looked to me as her like spiritual guide. Like she
Yeah,
she was gleaning everything she knew about, spiritual growth from me, and she was always complimenting me on how much I knew about the Bible. And in the grand scale of things, I knew nothing. And so,
hmm,
I went to SeekWell number one. I thought, okay, I'm going to go through this year, these four experiences, and it's going to fix all my problems that I have. So I will finally have the answer to these things I've struggled with for 30 years in, t 12 days, right? And
yeah,
I come home after the first week and I'm like, well, that's not going to be what I thought. I'm definitely not going to get fixed. It's going to be take way longer for that. But what it gave me was
yeah,
tools to, deal with that stuff. So
yeah.
I was going into it very excited. Like, I'm going to come home. I'm going to be able to be a different person immediately. And now I'll be able to be the man God created me to be. And when I come home and I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, there's still things here that I need to unpack. I
Yeah.
think there's a
I,
part of it that's like, well, I don't want to share that with my wife because I don't
yeah.
want her to know that I actually don't know as much as you think I do.
Yeah.
I'm not as holy as you think I am. I'm not as good of a Christian leader as you think. Like there's all these things where it's just like, okay, I want to maintain this version of me in your eyes. And if I really unpack this and I share everything, it might impact that vision you have of me. And
Yeah.
what I found, honestly, I found this through fitness even over the last year or so. It's you cannot fully grow into the person you're supposed to be if you're keeping things to yourself. Oh, for me in my fitness, it was my what I was eating and what I was not tracking and what I was not telling anybody about. The food and the drinks and the stuff that nobody else knew about. I'd show them everything else, this perfect life I'm living. But then I would, the example I give is I'd be sitting at lunch at work and I would have my meal that I made and is healthy. And then somebody would bring in
Hmm.
pizza. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna eat pizza. Everybody here knows that I'm on this health journey. Like I would be throwing them
Hmm.
off if I want to eat pizza. But at 1:30, when nobody's in the kitchen, I'm gonna go walk down and it's not just one slice of pizza, it's four slices of
Yeah.
pizza. And it's before I even think about it, it's just done. And now I have guilt and shame and regret and
Yeah.
all these feelings that come with that. And what I had to get to the point where it was, I'm not hiding anything anymore. If I slip up on my diet, I'm tracking it and I'm letting the person I have holding me accountable, I'm letting them know this is where I'm at.
Hmm.
And I'm having somebody share in those burdens. The Bible talks a lot about sharing each other's burdens. And
That's right.
with
Yeah.
my spiritual life, I have found our relationship with me and my wife has grown exponentially just by being open and vulnerable. Like,
Yeah.
babe, this is where I'm struggling right now. I need you to pray for this with me because here's
Yeah.
where I'm at, here's where my thoughts are, here's where my actions are. And there's no better accountability partner for a man than his wife and then to be surrounded by a group of men. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's one
What?
thing that's really impacted me.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you said that. I thought that everything would get fixed here. I was like, yeah, we probably just raised more questions without answers than you were maybe comfortable with.
Yes.
But really, that's the longer you follow Jesus, that's like what happens is you start to realize how little you actually do know. I actually think that's just true of life as well. The really old wise sages that are in their 60s and 70s, they're really comfortable with what they don't know.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and that's a vulnerable place to be. I actually think that's one of the magical pieces of SeekWell is we teach guys how to be vulnerable. Um, yeah, and it's a sad thing when you see a guy who doesn't know how to do that. You watch Alone at all?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm watching. I don't know what season it is, but 2024. But there's the guy from British Columbia, and I think his name. I'm blanking out his name, but anyway, he's 7 days into this, and he is crushing it on every level. He has caught so much fish he doesn't know what to do with it. He's kept the bears away. He's got a shelter. Like he is in great shape, and he taps out on day 7 because he was so uncomfortable with being by himself because the
Mm.
emotions that would rise to the surface. And it was just tragically sad. He said, I have kept these emotions hidden and I've stuffed them down my entire life. And I've trained my kids to do the same because I just
Mm.
don't want any emotions in our family. And he said, now I'm here by myself with no distraction and they are undoing me. I cannot get away from them. That is a man who doesn't know how to be vulnerable. So he can be disciplined and he can be successful and all this stuff. But the vulnerability piece is not weakness. It's being aware of who you are and how you affect other people and what God's doing in your life. And that's one of the things that, I think is just an unbelievable thing that happens with SeekWell is to be able to sit around the campfire with 10 or 12 guys. I'm looking at your hat and I see our logo, the campfire there. Uh, when I see that logo, that's what I think about personally. Is I just think about the conversation around that campfire, to sit around with a good drink in your hand and to look at the stars and just to say, "Hey, I'm not perfect. I'm struggling in this area, and this is what God revealed to me today, and I want to do better at this." And when we learn from the other 10 or 12 or 15 guys around that campfire, what we realize is we're not alone. And and then we can take that back to our wives or our friends or our family, and we lead through that vulnerability. And that's not weakness. And obviously, there's a place, time, and place to share everything. But oh my gosh! So I'm thinking of the guy showing up, to Warriors Way for the first time in the cold on Saturday, and you got your cinder block, and whatever the rep is, let's just say 5 reps of 20 push-ups, and he gets 8 in, and he's like, I can't go anymore. Well, that's vulnerability. Great, man. I'm not okay either. Maybe not here, but in a different place. Keep going. Show up next week and keep going. And that's how you get better.
Yeah, we had it might have been, it was probably 3 weeks ago. We had a situation a lot like that where, um, everybody was going to do a set amount of reps. And typically we're going for time. So it's like a 40
Mm-hmm.
second on, 20-second off type thing. So if you're not quite as in shape as the next person, it's fine. You just got 40 seconds. So do 40 seconds worth of push-ups. If
Yeah.
that's 5 push-ups, great. If it's 50, great. But this week, and I did it intentionally, we're going to do a set amount of, everybody's going to do this many reps of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was there was guys that got done early. And there were guys like, okay, what number are you at? I'm at 20 and
Yeah.
we're doing 100. And so what we found was, when the guy and the trick was don't put your brick down. So if you need to
Yeah.
overhead press, you could stop, but you got to hold your brick. And we had guys jump in and take the brick. And we had guys helping push hands up. And we had guys
That's
saying,
beautiful,
okay, I'm
man.
I'm going to do 20 of yours for you. And it just
Yeah.
happened naturally. I didn't share that. It just everybody just jumped in and I
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
sitting there just like with a huge smile on my face because it's exactly what we were trying to share that week is, sharing one another's burdens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
none of those guys left there that weekend feeling like, oh, I'm weak or oh, I'm this.
That's it.
All of them left there knowing I have people that are by me that are willing to pick up my burdens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I honestly, I think it was a really transformative week for us,
Yeah.
just with the guys that were there, and that bond just grew exponentially.
Yeah. Well, listen, as the leader, man, I don't know if you took a picture of that or wrote it down in a journal, but like picture that in your mind and hang on to that, Tim, because that's fruit. And uh, you, ministry is hard. Starting anything is hard, and there's going to be days where you're frustrated or discouraged, and you have to go back and remember that fruit. Uh, that's what keeps us going. So that
That's
that
it.
is so cool. I sure hope you did that, man, because
Yeah.
that's a beautiful. I'm picturing it actually as you're telling me, and that's just beautiful.
Yeah, I wrote it down. We take a picture every week, and I have that picture saved. And I definitely wrote it down in my journal, just the
Yeah,
things that
yeah,
happened that week. And again, this is as much for me as it is any of those guys, but just seeing those guys come together the way they did
yeah,
was like, okay, it clicked. Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
here
yeah.
we are. Couple more questions. What are some practical daily disciplines? Like somebody's looking like, hey, Tim, I really want to grow in this silence and solitude thing.
Hmm.
Where can I start? Like, I know we talk a lot about spiritual growth, and for most people, that means the YouVersion Bible app, verse of the day or a few verses of the Bible.
Yeah.
But when we talk about silence and solitude, we're not necessarily talking about just those few minutes of reading the Bible. So could you
Okay.
give just maybe a couple practical things that people could do if they want to start down that path?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the thing I would say is like, let's just start small. When guys come to the 1 year journey, they start in June, they finish in August. Well, let's start in July, August. The first thing we spend the first 3 months on is learning to settle, is what we call it. So it's the idea of being quiet before God. And the way that you do that essentially is you just take a couple of deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and then you just imagine like, let's see if I got one around here. I don't, but imagine like a mason jar being shook up right? Like it's got rocks and sediment and all that kind of stuff. And then the sediment just falling to the bottom. So imagine that's your soul. And, you know, in the beginning, it might take 15, 20, 30 minutes, but just practice for 5 minutes, just in through your nose, out through your mouth, and then just pay attention to your breathing. And then when you feel like that mason jar is settled, ask God a question. And what I like to do is personally, I do this every morning, is I imagine that there's an emotion or a feeling or a word or phrase that's like bubbling up to the surface. Uh, and and then I'll ask God, what do you want me to know about that? So, you know, in the beginning, it usually is a negative thing because we carry around so much negativity. So I'm thinking about, you hiding pizza or, whatever the case is, right? And you let shame float to the surface, right? Well, by naming that and saying, okay, God, I feel shame or I feel tired or, whatever. What do you want me to know about that? Now you're asking the one that made you and formed you and created you and who knows you better than anybody else. That's what Psalm 139 says. To now speak into your life. And he's like, hey, Tim, is that shame doing you any good? Or, hey, maybe you should stop eating 4 pieces of pizza and tell somebody about it, right? Like these are the things that we know, but the reason we don't want to be quiet is we don't want to know them. We actually don't. We would never say this out loud, but we actually don't want God to speak into those because if He does, then we're forced with a choice of obedience. And so it's just easier to be the masters of our own destiny or the king of our own castle or be in control of your life. But how's that working out for you? Not great. So that's why we start first with be still and listen is what if we could just take 10 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes to just quiet our mind? And we have a podcast called Free and Light, and there's actually a couple of episodes called Guided Settling, where we'll teach you how to do this. It's like 8 to 10 minutes. Um, and so if you don't know if it's not clicking, just go to the podcast, check out Guided Settling. I don't know if you could drop it in your show notes, but
Yep.
um, it will guide you through that and you'll know exactly what to do. It will radically change the orientation of your day because you're starting your day saying, I'm not the king, he's the creator. And so I'm going to come before my Heavenly Father and say, hey, what do you want me to know about today? Or what do you want me to know about me? You do that enough, real big changes will start to happen in your life. And that's not to say, by the way, you shouldn't read your Bible or anything like that. You should, but most people don't spend any time quiet and listening to Jesus. And so, your question's a great one, Tim, because you say, okay, silence and solitude, they're two different things. It's hard to get to solitude without getting first to silence. So start small, and then eventually maybe you can lead up to 15 minutes. Solitude's an entirely different thing. I think of like Alone, that show, we were talking about when I think of solitude, like to go away for 2 or 3 days and to turn off all the external distraction. That's what we do at our experiences. And we actually, not true solitude because there's other people with you, but even just to go off into the woods, we'll send you out usually like 90 minutes at a time. It will undo some people. I remember your brother came to one of our weekend experiences. Not your brother, but another guy who was on that experience. He was talking about just 90 minutes of quiet, and he said, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I don't ever want to do it again. And part of that was he's like, all these things are coming up to the surface, and I don't know what to do with it. Well, that was the first of 4 of those. By the fourth one, he was like, I have to do more of this because I'm never going to be who God's created me to be if I don't do this more. It on the fourth one, it's just 48 hours later, it was the craziest thing. That's in a microcosm, the example of the practice of silence, how impactful it really can be. So that's why we start there.
Yeah, I love that. I know, Mike Miller, he's one that has a big practice of going and walking in the woods.
Yep.
And he's getting some exercise, but he's not going to run. He's not going and doing it because he's training for anything. He's going and doing it to have some silence and solitude.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just spending some time purposely by yourself in the quiet, no headphones, no music, no nothing,
Yeah.
And, like you said, a lot of people, I talk about this in running a lot. I don't run with headphones. They failed on me
Hmm.
during a race. I never want to put myself back there again to where I count on them, so I
Yeah.
just don't do it.
Yeah.
But what I found over that time is during my running, there's a lot of time where I'm by myself and there's a lot of thoughts that all of my ability to push them down is
Yeah.
gone. And there they are. And they're scary. They're big thoughts. They're scary thoughts. But the more time you spend with them,
Yeah.
and I use that as my time to give stuff to God, but the more time you spend with them,
Yeah.
the more you
Yeah.
talk to God about them, the less scary they become. And then it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, there you are again. Okay, let's talk.
Yeah.
Like, why are you here?
Yeah. I think that's actually a really great point. Mike's example and yours. Sometimes when we say silence and solitude, a lot of times people have this vision of like going and sitting still for 90 minutes, or whatever's in their head. And that can be that. Like I actually have grown to the point where I can do that now, like 13 years later. Um, but we'll often say, like, hey, walk in silence. Hey, run in silence. Hey, sit for 20 minutes, get up, change positions. Um, there's a lot of different ways to do it. The point is to quiet your soul. And you can do that by actually moving your body at the same time.
Yeah, for me, I do a little bit of both of those. And what I've found is my distractions are way fewer
Hmm.
when I'm in motion.
Hmm.
When I'm sitting and I'm being still, distractions tend to come a lot more. And I do try to do that practice because that's something that I want to get better at.
Yeah.
Um, but there's definitely something to all of my ability to the song lyrics that I keep repeating to myself in my mind are
Yeah.
gone. Everything's gone except for this one thing that I know God's talking to me on. And it's all
Yeah.
about, okay, God, what do you want me to know about this right now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
come home from that run and it's like, okay, I may not have it all figured out. Just like coming home from one weekend at SeekWell, you're not gonna have it all figured out. Coming home from one workout at
Hmm.
Warriors Way, you're not gonna have it all figured out. But what you start doing is building little blocks and you start building the stones to create the changes that you're trying to improve on in your life.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Um, all right, man. Well, that's pretty much all I had. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
Uh, no, I mean, I just would just say if you're listening, you're hanging out with Warriors Way, or you've been invited a couple times, or somehow you found this podcast, you're like, what is this thing? There is a connection to the physical and spiritual. I track all my training metrics over the last 5 years, and I have noticed how much physically stronger I am because of that accountability discipline in my life. And then I've also noticed the connection to my spiritual life. I am better in almost every avenue of my life over the last 5 years. There's been tremendous growth because of the connection between the physical and the spiritual. And you know, um, I think it's Romans 12 where Paul says, "So in light of God's great mercy, submit your body fully to Christ." And I think it's really intentional that he says that. It's like submit your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit, give it all, heart, mind, soul, and strength to Jesus. Submit it to God and discipline yourself. Well, body's a big piece of it, and the longer that uh, the more we know about the body and the mind, and through psychology and all kinds of different things, we start to understand there's a huge connection. So if you're like, man, I don't know what this Warriors Way thing is, or man, I need to get up off the couch. Yeah, you do. Go get a cinder block, show up on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, and you just watch how God changes your outward appearance and your inward appearance and your family. And then, if you're at the wall spiritually and you're like, I need some help with that, come check us out at SeekWell. We'll be happy to have a conversation. But first, pick up the cinder block and get the Warriors way.
Amen. Well, like Tim said, if you found yourself on this podcast, however you found it, Maybe you're a friend of mine and you're listening to this just because I asked you to and you're supporting me. Maybe you're a friend of Tim's. You know one of the organizations in one way or another. However you found us, thank you for tuning in. If you want to know more information about either one of these organizations, Warriors Way or SeekWell, I'll put the links to both of those in the notes and how to contact both Tims here on this show today. There's multiple ways you can be involved and connected with SeekWell. So Tim mentioned just one of them here in these in the notes, but you can visit their website to see the different ways that you can connect with Tim and the group of guys and ladies at SeekWell. So, ladies, if you listen to this because you're trying to find content to send to your husband to get him off the couch, there's stuff in it for you too. SeekWell is for ladies too. They do the
Yeah,
same exact thing every quarter for the women. So go check it out and you can get something out of this too. But Tim, thanks again for the conversation today. I really appreciate you. And thanks again.
you're welcome, man. Thanks for having me.